Hello and welcome to an unexpected podcast. My name is Tim, and with me as always, we have Matt and Mick, and I'm basically a regular, Robert Cron.
Hey guys.
Devin and Evan will probably be joining us on later on in the episode, so we'll talk to them shortly as well. But on today's topic, we have a list review from Robert Snook, and we're also going to go over a list that everyone will be taking to tournaments coming up shortly. One of Mick's is going to be Mix is going to be from Articon, and then Matt and Evans will be from a Nashville tournament coming up. But we'll go over the list review first. So Robert has a 350-point doubles list. So it's our first, I believe, doubles list review. He says he's planning on bringing an Angmar list with his brother, 350 points each. His first warband is the Witch King with Crown on Fell Beast at 2-11-1. 4 orcs with shield, 1 Dead Marsh Spectre, 5 orcs with spears. And his second warband is a Barrow Wight with 5 orcs with shield and 6 orcs with spear. It's exactly 350 points and 23 models. He says it's using the standard rules and scenarios for doubles match play. He wants to know what our lists and what lists he set up should his brother bring based on his current list. He says they were thinking about taking the Tainted Unarmored Horse / Shade and another Barrow Wight with warbands filled up with orcs. And he asks, should I have wild wargs and warg riders for mobility? I always like, even it's lower points, so I mean that's kind of it's hard to fit certain things in there, but because warg riders are so cheap, and I believe Angmar can just take fell wargs by themselves, so I always think throwing maybe 1 or 2 in each person's. And then that way you have a little bit of mobility out there to grab objectives if you need to. You have 23 models, which to be fair at 700 points for half an army is very decent. Obviously they're orcs, so it makes it a little bit squishy, but you do have a Witch King with the Crown on Fell Beast. 2-11-1, I mean, you have to be careful with them.
That's a dead Witch King.
Yeah, that's
it's a little bit of a weak Witch King with a lot of stuff around him. Which, of course, him on Fell Beast with the Crown is amazing. And obviously, you can reroll 1 dice for spells, although you probably won't be using spells that much at this points value. I like the 1 Dead Marsh Spectre, very nice. I also love the Barrow Wight to help out with the Witch King. As for the Tainted and Shade, I actually do kind of like the idea of a Shade, because I don't think anybody's going to bring anything to kind of shut the Shade down. I'm not sure about the Tainted. Maybe I would bring someone like Birder to add a little bit more hitting power into the list and then still be able to take orcs, and he's cheaper. I don't really think you need double caster in this. I like the idea of Birder with a Shade and then fill it up with orcs like you said. I would add maybe 2 or 3 wargs or 2 warg riders for a little bit of mobility. But I'll go over to Mick first. What are your thoughts on this list? And then what would you do as the second person's list?
So the doubles tournaments, they usually play different type of scenarios than the standard tournaments, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So in some of the tournaments, in some of the lists I've seen, or like scenarios, I noticed that, let's say, your army might deploy in one corner, your friend's army might deploy in the opposite corner.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously your own army has to be self-sufficient, but you also want to be able to work in a way where you can combine the 2 forces. So looking at this, I'm seeing 23 models, which sounds pretty decent, but at the same time, I'm thinking that the Witch King himself can take 18 models with him. So I would be tempted to simply take a single warband, just the Witch King's warband, and buff up the Witch King a bit. Definitely give him 3 might points, 3 fate points, and potentially something like 14 or 15 will. Probably drop the Barrow Wight to pay for that, and then stack up his warband with orcs, some fell wargs, wild wargs, not fell wargs. Maybe 1 or 2 Denmark Spectres, and essentially the other side of the army has to be something that, in the scenarios where you combine the 2 forces, you essentially have like a very strong 700-point Angmar list. So yeah, something like Shade makes sense. But ultimately, you will want to have as many models as possible, because if you're looking at 700 points of Angmar, they're all orcs, defense 5 or 4 in many cases. You kind of need to have like high 40s, 50 something models at least. So I'd be looking at complementing the other half with just as many models as you can bring, and maybe a shade or like a couple of borrow whites or something along those lines. I wouldn't necessarily be taking a second right.
Okay. Rob?
Yeah, I think all of that makes sense. The Witch King, I definitely would beef him up. Just kind of looking at it, if you're going to run one Barrow White, for sure, I would add the second one, because my experience against Angmar, one white is not that scary, but when they come in pairs, they become a little bit more reliable and they're a little bit harder to play around. When I kind of look at this, and having played a few doubles tournaments, Mick, you're absolutely right. The scenarios are kind of weird, and sometimes you end up completely on the opposite sides of the board and you essentially don't even meet the whole game, right? So both armies should be completely self-sufficient if possible. And when I look at this, I'm either thinking you go with two big hitty models. So like you said, beef up the Witch King, drop the Barrow White, and just add as many models to that warband as possible. And then for the second army, do something very similar and do like Gullivar and as many models as possible around him, and just have two like big hitters that can be independently bullying the opponent's smaller doubles armies. Or exactly what you said, which is the exact opposite of that, which is maybe even drop the Fellbeast on the Witch King down to like a horse and add as many models as possible to that side, and then do something very similar for the other half. So you almost have this like big horde. And so I would kind of go one of two ways with that. And that's entirely based on how the double scenarios work, and the fact that there were games that legitimately me and my opponent, we kind of did the whole, when these armies work together, they're both going to be really awesome and cover each other's bases. And then 2 games out of 5, we never even met, right? So as for the direct question, absolutely would add some of the wild wargs for the mobility. Would add another Barrow White if you're keeping the first. But yeah, those are my thoughts just from an initial read.
Okay, Matt?
Okay, so I guess I'm going to start with the assumption that he wants to keep the Fellbeast here. I think dropping the Fellbeast and putting the Witch King on a horse here, depending on what you had in kind of the other half of the list, might be something to think about. I think if you want to keep the Witch King on the Fellbeast and you want that to be kind of the hitter on this side of the list, which I think is reasonable, what I would actually do is I would drop the Dead March Spectre. It gives you 15 points, and then you can have a 3-12-2 Witch King, which is probably good enough. You'll never want to cast a spell with more than one will with that, and you're going to want to save. You're not going to want to cast more than half a dozen spells, but that'll leave still 6 points left for casting. I mean, you still have 2 casters. You still have that Barrow White who has another 5 points of will to go in. So basically, what you're doing is you're either each turn, probably for like 5 turns or so, as long as you can get away with it. You have the Barrow White. You have the Witch King is going to cast either Transfix or Compel or something scary like that with 1 will, and re-roll it if it fails. And then the Barrow White is going to shoot a paralyze at it after the target has spent their will, because you're probably going to end up fighting another 350 point army. So because it's not going to be that big. The way these double scenarios tend to work in the matched play guide is, as Mick pointed out, basically your army A is fighting their army A, and their army B is fighting your army B. And then, whoever the people who tend to win are the ones that can bring both sides of their army together against the other. And which I guess argues for keeping the Witch King on a Fellbeast, because if he wants to, he can just kind of abandon this half of his army to do, basically to fight on for as long as he can, join the other half, and be the punch to the other half. And I think if this is what is in this half of the army, I think I would go with the other army of Shade, Captain on Warg, and then as many orcs as you can fit in, and put some of them, make some of them Warg Riders to give you some mobility, and then maybe throw a Dead Marsh Spectre or two in that side of the list, because I think you'll probably have the points for that. Because that's going to that half of the list is going to be spending less. It's only going to have 24 slots to put stuff in, and it's going to be spending less points on heroes. So I think probably my minimum surgery recommendation for this is just drop the Dead March Spectre, take those 15 points to give you 1 extra might, 1 extra will, 1 extra fate. If you wanted to, you could probably stand to drop another orc. So if you could drop an orc with a spear, give 1 orc a shield and a spear, and then probably put another point of will into the Witch King. That probably wouldn't hurt too. And then I take the Shade and a Captain on the other side. And the reason you take the Captain on the Warg on the other side is, you hope that the Shade's half of the warband isn't the one that needs to move, but at least you've got some march there to move the Shade to where you need the Shade to be. I think that's how I'd do it. I don't think you want the Tainted on the other side. I think you want the Shade to get the most out of your numbers, and you want to march to try and get the two halves of your army together in these match play scenarios.
So that's what I was just going to ask next, was the Tainted. So Rob and Mick, I know we didn't talk about this. So I know that they're talking about Tainted and Shade. I know, Mick, you talked about how much you enjoy the Tainted. Are you a fan of him in this or not really?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily take the Tainted and the Witch King. I think in this case it would have to be just one or the other, because otherwise the Witch King already costs you so many points. You end up with like a very small army if you take both. And essentially, if you think about 350 point lists, it's not like you will be fighting against a 700 point list necessarily. Like, you won't always be combining everything. And when you're fighting 350 versus 350, there aren't that many things within 350 that can actually deal with the Shades so easily. I mean, yeah, there will always be some sort of a big hero or something like that, but essentially, it's not your opponent's entire army trying to nullify the Shade. It's just it's often going to be just a 350, and then even if they're managing to deal with it, you can always try to fly the Witch King in. So yeah, I would stick to Shade as well.
Okay. I know that there's been two kind of main talking points we've mentioned. So one was you take, the Witch King perhaps maybe by himself, if you wanted to drop the Barrow White, and you fill up his warband and you beef him up a little bit. And the other warband would be a bunch of models to kind of boost up the numbers. And then there was the concept of maybe 2 big hitters, and they each only can lead X amount of numbers. So your numbers get lower, but you have these 2 monsters that really just can't be stopped. Are you guys more of a fan of the 2 monsters or making the large numbers? I know that obviously you guys have mentioned that, so you might be preferred to one or the other, but after hearing both, are you still on the side of larger numbers, or do you prefer the idea of 2 big heroes with 1 warband each?
Well, it probably depends if you're really going for a win, or if you just want to like YOLO and yeah, go for it. I mean, I like at this stage coming out with Pandemic, I would be taking Gulliver and Witch King. But later on, potentially I would not, just because they're much riskier choices.
It would be really fun to see both of them on the table, especially if you each had one. That'd be a ton of fun at a tournament for sure.
Well, and specifically in this list, because they both fly, all of those problems of these are disparate armies, like they can link up in a way to bully one side, and all you really need to do is fill up as many kind of orcs with shields and just shield and hold the line and try to hold off and not die as fast as possible, and then these 2 monsters can kind of go and clear things together, right? So I mean, I think it would be effective, and I think it would be fun. I think I'm so rusty that I'd lose every game, because as Mick said, they are very specific models that you have to know how to use, but it's certainly an option for this kind of like Angmar plus Angmar doubles strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so the risk with doing that, I guess, is you have 2 flying heroes, two expensive flying heroes, each of which can fly off and join the other side. But then you're going to leave a whole bunch of orcs that are just going to kind of stay behind and die horribly. And you could find yourself, if you adopt that strategy, you could find yourself broken very quickly, because one side,
Of course.
one side's orcs, when left behind, will die, and then you pick off a few more from the other side, and you'll be at 50%.
Yeah, so it's obviously far more risky. So it just depends how are you feeling about this tournament. If you feel like you just want to,
you feel lucky, punk.
It's also a play style and comfort level thing too, right? So
yeah. If you actually feel like you want to win and you want to build a very, very solid list, then you're gonna need the numbers.
Okay, so I know I'll ask one last question. I know Matt had mentioned the captain. Now, obviously, with barrel whites, they're very good for the paralyzed, especially at this low points value where there's not going to really be magic to protect any of the heroes. Are you a fan of the captain on Warg, like Matt said, or would you prefer a barrel white in the other war bands? Of the second person, I guess I'll say.
I prefer the captain generally.
Captain?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like you need some sort of march. And I was even thinking you could potentially swap the barrel white for the captain here and put the barrel white in the other side. But yeah, it just kind of depends.
It depends if you're taking the shade on the other side too, because if you're taking the shade on the other side, you really need something that has might over there, even if it's just to call heroic moves. And your options are kind of, if you're taking the shade at 350 points, your options for getting might in are fairly limited at that point. I mean, I think they may be limited to a captain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Angmar isn't exactly a powerhouse for bringing might as it is, right? So that captain's actually pretty important in most lists.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
especially if like we said, you're on opposite sides and you need to get your main force with the Witch King to help them out. I mean, that's always a very helpful thing to have.
On the other hand, though, those double barrel whites on one side, if they're the ones facing your opponent's big hero, you're going to want the two to try to make sure to get that paralyzed through. But I think that's also a little bit riskier, again, with the no might, and paralyzed doesn't always go off, and there's resistance, and et cetera, et cetera. So,
okay. Thank you for your list, Robert. Let us know what you end up taking to the tournament on the other side of the list, or if you change your current list up, and let us know how you did at that. We're going to move into the next thing for the main topic, which is lists that everybody on the podcast is taking to upcoming tournaments. So I'll bring this over to Mick. Mick, if you want to go over your list for Articon.
Well, actually, before you go over your list for Articon, why don't you just, because there are some people out there, because this has been asked before in the Q&A session, there are some people out there who don't know what Articon is. So why don't you tell people what Articon is?
Articon is the world's largest SBG tournament. Essentially, what it is there is a gigantic room being hired in a hotel in Manchester, and the room is being hired for 5 days, I believe. There's a English Open, which is like a qualifier to the Invitational tournament, which allows you to win a free ticket to Articon. That happens on Wednesday and Thursday. Then we have Friday, which has always been a day where we played Devon's Scales of Arda, this sort of fun mini tournament. Then at the same time we played the doubles tournament, which was 3 rounds. This year at the same time there's going to be the invitational finals. So people who have won their country's invitational tournaments have been invited to participate in a knockout tournament on a Friday. And then Saturday and Sunday is the main event, which is this year single army 600 point forces to see who wins the world championships. And at the end of the 6 rounds, there's actually a 7th round where the top 2 players play against each other. So you could potentially, if you arrived on a Tuesday night and you played through all of the events, you could potentially play through up to, I think, 16 games of SPG in 5 days. So it's basically you come, you turn off your phone, you don't talk to your loved ones, you don't communicate with anyone out there, and you just play toys for non-stop for 5 days.
Mhm.
And have you gotten any sense of how many international players are actually coming in? Because
Yeah,
I know I don't think
don't
anybody's
actually know at the
coming from the
moment.
U.S. at this point. Unfortunately,
Um,
we were like the
no,
last
like-
holdouts, and we finally
Yeah.
ditched.
I was actually looking at the team compositions the other day, because normally teams like the team tournaments is a very big part of Articon, because the rules for Articon also include that every player tends to join a team, and then within a team you're not allowed to repeat named heroes. So for example, if I'm using Suladan, then no one else on, let's say, my 9-person team can be using Suladan. So it additionally diversifies the meta. So this year, I think when I was checking yesterday, so by the way, today is the 15th of August as we're recording this, and this is going to go out after Articon. So we'll see how we do. Yesterday when I was checking how many teams there are, I think there were only like 8 or 9 teams registered, and normally I think there was always in excess of like 20 teams and internationally. So I don't think there's going to be many international people, and I don't actually know how many people are going to show up, because I think the largest we've had was, I think, 225 players 2 years ago. But this year I have no idea.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's like at least 80 or 100 or something like that. But and especially seeing that this is the first like really big tournament out of the pandemic, so I would expect in excess of 100, but I really don't know.
Yeah.
Basically, it's the Disney World of SPG.
Yeah.
That's the best way to describe it.
It's a really great time, but it's also one of those vacations you need a vacation from afterwards, because you're just you get home and you're bushed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's different if you're in the UK, or at least not traveling through time zones.
Oh,
but
yeah.
if you're coming from the US, you need to get there at least a full day before to kind of recover from the jet lag, or at least get over the worst of the jet lag.
I remember last year, it was Articon, and then like maybe a week later was Nova. So I went through Articon, had a great time, came home, and by Nova, I was a zombie. I was like, what is SPG? How do you throw dice?
Yeah.
So, but it's an amazing time, and I can't wait to go back eventually.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was the other thing, is the way the timing worked out. It was kind of like a 1-2 punch of Articon, and then you get home, and then you're right. It seemed like a week later you were getting on the plane to go.
It was like the next weekend.
Yeah. And you're doing it all over again. But anyway, sad not to be there. But
well, this year it should be fun, especially since most players probably haven't played the game for like a year and a half. So most of us are gonna be like, oh, what does this guy do?
That's right.
So that's actually one of the reasons why in the end I decided I might not be taking any spellcasters, because I'm just gonna forget what's happening.
Well, and since that time, you've also had a lot of during the lockdown and the pandemic, so there's going to be things showing up like legendary legions that nobody's ever played with or against, right? So
yeah, and there's the other thing that just a week ago there was the new FAQ. So
that's right.
Rangers of Ithilien have also been nerfed,
and half the players dropped.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not a funny one, because the points are actually pretty low. It's only 600 points, and so initially over the last year and a half, whenever I was thinking about Ardacon, I was thinking, well, it's 600 points. There's going to be Rangers. We have to take a Shadow Lord or Galadriel, and otherwise there's like what's the point even in competing? But then when the FAQ came out last week, I just started thinking, oh, maybe I can actually take something else. Yeah, so this list has actually gone through like 17,000 different versions, and I still have, I think, an entire 24 hours to submit. So chances are my final list will not be the same as you can see on the screen, depending on how well the guys think here I'm gonna do.
Yeah, let's see if we can fix it or break it.
Yeah, but my actual expectation for the tournament is like, if I can win 3 games, I'm happy out of 6. So.
Well, in to a certain extent, the fact that you're bringing it on here is really a no lose situation for you, because if you, as long as you accept our changes, right? If you accept our changes and you win, you were brilliant. And if you accept our changes and you lose, our advice was horrible. So you should have stuck to your guns.
Yeah, exactly. Well, or I could just not accept any changes and either lose and then just be kicked out of the podcast on the basis of, oh yeah, this guy is just terrible. Like, why are you listening to him? or not accept changes and actually do really well and win the whole thing, and then I can just retire.
So why don't we do this? Why don't you talk through your list, and then maybe we can tweak it a bit, and then I will keep as a, because I had actually I have my Articon list already written. I had actually practiced with it, and I can, I don't actually have it in front of me, but I know it well enough so that I can tell you what's in it, and then you can kind of decide whether it just think about whether or not how it would have fared against that list.
By the way, also, I was actually moving houses over the last few weeks, so there was another list I had, which was a good list, which I really wanted to use, but I haven't even started painting it. So there's just so many issues here.
Did you say you had 24 hours though?
Well, I have like 24 hours still to change the list. Yeah, I could submit the other one and then paint it in a couple of days and then do it. So
what are you even doing here? You should be painting right now.
I know. Well, I still haven't finished painting this list, so that's the whole problem. And the other disadvantage I have over other players, well, under other players in a sense, is that there's already been a couple of tournaments in the UK over the last like 2-3 weeks. And so a lot of people have already started practicing. And there's going to be the Open where a lot of people are going to be practicing. So I will probably show up on Saturday morning, having not played for almost 2 years, and playing against people who probably have played about 20 games in the last few weeks. So with that in mind, here comes.
With that in mind, what are you worried about?
Yeah, here comes the latest version of this. So Warband 1 is Suladan on an armored horse. He is leading 9 Harrowing warriors with bows, 8 Serpent Guard, and 1 Harrowing warrior with a spear. Then in the second Warband, we have Gothmog riding a warg and carrying a shield, with 7 Moran orcs with shields. Obviously, their equipment is going to include things like maces or axes and things like that. I still haven't picked exactly. Then 4 Moran orcs with shields and spears, 4 orcs with spears, and Shelob. So that gives me 36 models in total, which is maximum I can take for these 2 warbands. 600 points and 6 points of might. Now, I can add also that initially I was convinced I had to take Shadow Lord because of Ranges of Aetherium. So this version now is basically, what if I don't have to take the Shadow Lord? What if instead I could have someone else? And I went through versions with Camul they're selling, thinking it would be cool to have a second big hitter who also has Heroic Strike. And then I went down to Gothmog because I thought it would be cool to have more possible might points. His special rule is pretty cool. And you don't really see him on the tables very often. In fact, I haven't played him in years, probably. So yeah, so here it is. 36 models, 3 quite big heroes, 9 bows.
Okay. I'll go to Matt first. Any thoughts?
So yeah, this is interesting. I mean, I think it's
not terrible yet. It's interesting.
It's definitely not terrible. It's got 36 models. It has 6 might plus Gothmog's Master of Battle, and it has Shelob that can kind of go in and tank the big heroes. And I think I think the way I would want to play this is I would want to keep Shelob kind of near Gothmog for 2 reasons. First of all, everybody's going to be wanting to heroic move to get Shelob with only the one die. So they're all going to be calling heroic moves around Shelob. And that means Gothmog is going to be right there to get a free heroic move called back to see if you can get in and get the attack on Shelob. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic. And then also, if you can get it into a situation where, and I think you got a big tough warband, so you can, battle line where you can do this, where you can actually kind of get Gothmog into fights with somebody who is other than the big hero. The big hero is going to be calling, heroic strikes to deal with Shelob, and that'll give Gothmog a free heroic strike to at least get him up where he can feint, or maybe get him higher than another fight 5 hero. It's just something to keep in mind when you're kind of playing Shelob near Gothmog, is think about the possibility of getting Gothmog into a position where he can benefit from a free heroic strike called against Shelob.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
I think that's going to be fun. I guess obviously there are different directions you could have taken this list, and I've seen you take. So you chose not to go the Betrayer option. I think the Super Shelob Legendary Legion would have been kind of an interesting choice, but I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of the Gothmog Shelob combination. I'm kind of interested to see how that goes. I guess the other piece of advice to you is, obviously Gothmog's got to kind of stay back and let Shelob do the fighting for him against the big hitter. But, it's 600 points, so there's probably not going to be more than one big hitter.
Well, also, on that note, Gothmog actually has heroic defense. Mm-hmm. So even if there is a massive hitter there, like, I can always just heroic defend.
And there's probably a lesser chance of magic as well at 600, so you probably won't have to worry about that either.
Yeah. Yes, the answer is yes, he can. But I think the better option for you is to put Shelob into the big hitter and send Gothmog against the secondary one and get the kind of leverage, the synergy you're going to get from those two folks. Unless, getting Gothmog into the big hitter frees up Shelob to go into somebody else. One thing I have kind of found with Shelob, and because I have played a couple times with the Legendary Legion that has her in it, the Kirathungal Legendary Legion, is Shelob really does not want to fight just a guy with a spear behind him, because half the time she will lose to that guy with a spear behind him and accomplish nothing, and the other half of the time she'll just kill a guy. Whereas if you can manage to get Shelob into the big hitter, half the time she'll lose, and she can take a punch with her 6 will. And the other half, but if she beats that one guy, then she can actually, knock him over, take him off his horse, do some damage. But Shelob's job, I think, is definitely to be a tank rather than as like, somebody who tries to munch through troops, because she just doesn't have the attacks to do that.
Well, that's the thing. So Shelob also benefits from an interaction with Suladan because Suladan is a banner.
Yep, that's true.
He's within 6 inches. So Shelob actually rolls 3 dice to win combats with fight 7, which is really, really strong against event basic troops.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
yeah, it's almost. It's almost overkill against basic troops, and she can even with rolling 2 dice with 1 reroll, she can still flub, because remember, the other guy's probably going to have a banner too, and he's going to be rolling probably 2 dice at a minimum with 1 reroll. So
that would be great as well for heroic combats, to get Shelob to be able to move across the line and then hurl stuff afterwards as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability to just, like Matt said, be able to win fights easier with the fight 7, and then if you did heroic combat into things and move her onto the lines to try to hurl things, that would be very good as well. Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah, when I look at this list, I think everything on here is solid, right? Every single line item I read as I reach down the list is like, I like that. This is a good, selection. I think Shelob is really fun. She's a good she can play kind of a lot of roles in this list. She can disrupt battle lines, right, by just kind of launching her into troops more with the idea that she's going to be hurling and barging and just being a general nuisance. She can kind of be a distraction, going, you know, off somewhere and hoping that they take the bait, that they're too afraid of Shelob. She has great interactions with Gothmog and Suladan. At the end of the day, you just have a pretty solid battle line, right? You're going to have your strength 4, you're going to have your poison in there. And so you're going to want to be, and you're going to have your 6-inch banner with Suladan, who is just, as I'm sure everybody knows, the most amazing profile probably in the game. And so you're really going to try to use Shelob to get people to, you know, hit your battle line at a disadvantaged place so you can just grind through them, because I think that you're in a good place to do that. You have a lot of tools for that. You have a lot of bows with poison. My only hesitation is really not to do with this list, because I think it's just a solid, well-built list. It's that I almost have no sense of what the competition is going to be, right? Like, I don't even know what the meta is going to be, right? So trying to think through what this would run into and how to solve that is more challenging than critiquing the list itself, because I think the list itself is solid, right? There's nothing bad here. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing I would specifically change either. And then, you know, Suladan bringing the banner for scenarios is really great. So I'm trying to, in my mind, think back when I was going to Articon, what I was building and how, if I had run into this list with that, how it would fare. But I just think it's great. Like, I think it's really good. Yeah, Shelob is kind of a hit or miss, but she brings a lot for 90 points, right? You can't ignore her, because if she does go off, she's going to be a real problem for you. And even if she kind of bounces off, she's still there and you have to deal with her, right? You have to devote resources to dealing with her. So I think it's really good. You know, thumbs up, really.
All right.
I've played against armies that are Morannons with Haradrim behind and Suladan a lot, and they're always great, right? They're just they grind really well, they're very reliable, and they just play the game really well. They don't do anything tricksy, they're not relying on like gotchas, they just play the game well. So
well, that's actually one of the reasons why in the end I think I'm deciding on something like this, because like, I feel like I haven't played for such a long time. I don't actually want to be doing anything tricksy.
Right.
I just want to get stuck in and hopefully play better. And even if I play badly, I don't want to be punished too much for my mistakes. I want to have things which will get me out of mistakes.
I think you definitely succeeded on that with the build. So
I have to say I'm really a big fan of this list, to be honest with you. I mean, you got the 6-inch banner. You've got a 12-inch stand fast with a Hero of Legend, so that's really great for holding objectives, of course. You've got 3 big hitters, especially at 600 points. I mean, all of them can take out 2 models a turn very easily if they need to. And of course, like Matt said, the ability to have fight 7 in the list to help out Gothmog or Suladan, whichever needs help. You have an ability to hurl stuff. You have 9 bows, which 9 bows at that points level is going to be pretty decent. You should outshoot an okay amount of people. You've got fight 4 in there, and like Rob said, you get some strength 4 in there. I had one thought, which I don't know if everybody agrees with this or not. I would consider maybe dropping 2 of the Morannon orcs with shield and spear, upgrade the front rank to Black Numenorians for the courage / fight 4. And then you could also upgrade a Haradrim warrior with spear and a serpent guard to serpent riders. So you go down 2 models, but you get a fight 4 front rank with some good courage in there as well in case you need to charge something. And you also get 2 cavalry models in there to do a little bit of damage. I know obviously at 600 points you want to have numbers. I just think having that fight 4 across the board will be helpful. And then also it gives you a little bit of mobility. And as we all know, Serpent Riders are some of the best cavalry in the game. So it gives you a little bit of hitting power if you need to go on the lengths with maybe Shelob or something like that to help out. But I'm curious what you guys think. Maybe make your thoughts on that first.
So initially, this army had a lot of Black Numenorians. But if you're taking Gothmog, you can't really go that route if you really want to use him to full potential, because both of his special rules are specifically applying only to Mordor orc models. So the hatred against men which is within 3 inches. All of the Mordor and Orc keyworded models get +1 to 1 against man. And then his other rule, all Mordor orcs within 12 inches may reroll all fail to 1 rolls when making strikes for a turn. So I feel like if you're gonna have Gothmog, you kind of have to forget about Leptinarians.
Yeah, the other synergy that doesn't exist is you have no. I mean, you're taking Gothmog instead of a Wraith essentially, and without the Wraith, people aren't taking -1 on the Courage test. I mean, so I guess with that said, let me just tell you what had I come to Articon, what my list would have been. I don't have the thing in front of me, so I'm not going to read out every one, but yeah, basically I was going to bring Goblin Town because I think Goblin Town is devastating at 600 points.
Ridiculous.
And I had the Goblin King with Gollum in his warband, and I had the Scribe, Grinna, a Goblin Captain, and then a Goblin Mercenary Captain. I think the Goblin Mercenary Captain had about a half dozen mercenaries in his warband. Then the rest of it was just goblins, but there ended up being 70 of them. And there might have been like 72 or 73 of them. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, just 72.
So
So big deal.
No, it's going to make or break it if it's 72 or 73.
Yeah.
It's a very important detail to me.
So, I mean, I my understanding is that Goblin Town isn't that big in the British meta. So I don't know whether it's something to think about. You know, the Wall of Baranans is very useful against Goblin Town. And also those kind of low courage horde armies, just because you can even play little games with them where you have like a Morannon and then slightly less than an inch away from them, or I'm not a Morannon, a Black Numenorian, and then slightly more than an inch away from them is another Black Numenorian, and then you have a Spearman that connects the two of them, so that the terror wall also actually gets kind of expanded at as like a zipper, and you can create little rings with them. But anyway, it's something to think about. Is those terror walls are useful against goblins.
Okay, Devin has actually just joined us now.
Hey everyone.
Hey Devin.
Sorry,
So we're going over a mixed Articon list. It's on the screen if you can see it, and we basically just all gave our reviews of it. So if you have a second to look it over, maybe give Mick your thoughts on what you think of it.
Man, this is like a deep dive in 1 minute. Let's see.
Right.
So, all right, what am I looking at here? It's Celadon, banner wide. He's once the master of battle and a big monster. Shelob. What do we got? 600 points, 36 models. Well, they already solid model count. Morannons, so high defense, pretty much. I'm assuming the Haradrim with bows do have spears. Do they have?
No. This would be bows in front, serpent guard, and spear behind.
So he's putting the Haradrim warriors in the front. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Which I think is what you want to do, because otherwise you can end up getting outranged by somebody with bows who decides to pick off your spearmen.
I can understand that being smart. So basically, I mean, okay, Celadon has March. That's right. Okay. So Gothmog, strike. All right. So, I mean, basically you have triple threat with plenty of units to back it up at 600 points. I mean, plenty of bow fire across the board. I mean, serpent guard in the back. So basically, both warbands operate independently. Plenty of might. Shelob, it's kind of a random throw. I'm assuming. So Articon, 6 rounds. You don't know the scenarios. So potential for Maelstrom. So what, you're gonna unleash Shelob first if you go first on Maelstrom missions, and then follow up with backing them up with Celadon and Gothmog afterwards, since they have might.
Yeah.
Okay, then. Yeah, I mean, off the cuff, like without a little bit of time review, it doesn't seem like it has obvious weaknesses. Given you have a banner, so fight for fight for generously where you need it. Handful of guys. So mobility, you don't have any. Other than Shelob, I guess, but you wouldn't use them for the type of mobility that I'm talking about. So you have mobility in combat and kind of a surprising, like hurls and such, but no like quick throw out there sort of model. So I guess the orcs with spears sort of operate as that if needed. So it's not like a
Shelob's-
great-
Shelob's not-
Both heroes have heroic march.
Yeah.
And Shelob moves there, and Gothmog moves there, and so on.
Well, so the march, definitely covered there. I was just talking about like like some people throw in some quick thrown cavalry.
Like a random model. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Shelob
it's not a problem that you don't have it. It's just you're probably not going to throw Shelob to do that job. So
I mean, Shelob is effective in, say, Reconnoiter, where you're like, all right, I'm going to send Shelob and I'm going to make sure I get one model off the board, and everybody else is going to, their job is to stop anybody getting off the board.
I almost feel like Shelob would be more used instead of getting her off the board. I mean, you could maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but instead of getting her off the board, I imagine she'd be chasing models that would be on your opponent's side getting off the board. Like if they threw 3 random cav or whatever, and you didn't want to send the whole army, Shelob can just go grab it real quick and then come back. But that's just an assumption based on the fact. But I mean, your list is wide enough where you can go wide, you can shoot with bows. So you could probably just do a mass head and just toss her up. But that's one scenario of a potential 18. So I guess you don't have too much to worry about. So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, like, I mean, I'm hitting all the main points that we often talk about here on the channel. And I probably have said some things you guys said just before I arrived. But I think it's a pretty solid list with not so obvious weaknesses. I think, if I were to fight against, and obviously this depends on what I'm using, but I mean, I like the fact that your weakest units are backed up by Fight 4. So I will say that, like, you have plenty of them and they are backed up. So, I mean, I think it's actually a pretty interesting list. I would say I'm like trying to think of alternatives, like what would I have thrown in, and the glaring one is Gothmog coming in at 145 points, which means you could exchange him for practically anyone. Is he your leader? Who would you choose as your leader?
So Gothmog is Hero Valor, so Sildon has to be the leader.
Has to be Sildon.
So the other options were obviously the Witch King, which I wasn't able to spend enough points on to actually make him a leader anyway.
Okay.
Other than that, like, there aren't any other legends in Mordor which I could have used.
By the way, does that bother anybody? Because I mean, Suladan and Gothmog were both supposed to have been at Pelennor Fields, right?
Yeah.
Why wasn't Suladan in charge?
So here's what my thought on that is usually they make the list to be self-contained. So if they're a hero of legend, like Sharky is a hero of legend, doesn't really speak of his status in Middle Earth. So if they were to make like a Pelennor Fields Legion, then they drop, Suladan down to like the same tier and such. But I think you're talking about the fact that they're like Suladan's legend and Gothmog's valor.
Yeah, Suladan's legend, Gothmog's valor, they're both there. I mean, you'd think,
I think
you think Sauron would be like, sorry, he ranks you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, reasonably, yeah. I think that's a legion. That would be what they would call a legion thing.
I have a feeling that legion would be used a lot, by the way, if that came out like a.
I think what they probably didn't want the Golden King to outrank Suladan.
Yeah. Well, and now I have this image in my head of Gothmog going, "The time of the orc has come," and Suladan going, no, actually, sorry.
You guys are just kind of pawns here. It's really the men who are going to thrive. It's just which ones. All right.
The age of men is continuing?
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. Suladan's like, sorry, I've got seniority.
I've been here a couple more years. I put in my time.
Right. I'm imagining that scene in Robin Hood Men at Tights where he's like, read the script, I get another shot, right? Read the script, I am a legend.
All right, so that's Mick's list. We're going to move on to Matt's list. Matt, if you want to go over the tournament real quick.
Sure. So I'm going down to Nashcon, which, I can't remember the actual name of the tournament. And Austin, please, if you're listening, forgive me for this. But there is a specific name for the tournament. But it's at Nashcon, which is the convention. It's at the Music City Hotel down in Nashville, and it's going to be next weekend. Friday, the group down there is going to be running a couple of kind of scenario games. They're going to do the Assault on Helm's Deep, and then they're going to be doing I think it's a Goblin Town Civil War, which is going to be a little thing where you each have like a war band of goblins, and you kind of like see who's on top after you kind of claw at all of your opponents. So that sounds fun. And then there's a 2-day tournament that goes after that, and it is 5 games. It is 895 points, which I understand has something to do with the number of pages in Austin's I think it's his copy of the Two Towers or something like that, but it has something to do with the number of pages in a book, and not just some weird random collection of numbers. So
even if it was,
actually,
we have tournaments that are literally just random concoction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
If it was Rainier's tournament, it would be random collection. I think he did something that was like based on the zip code or something like, or the area code of where he was located. But yeah, so it's 895 points. And this is going to be a list that's similar to one that I brought up on this podcast before. And it's an opportunity to bring the Iron Hills Chariot. So I don't get that many opportunities to bring it out. So I'm going to bring it out for this thing. So Warband 1, the army leader is Galadriel, Lady of Light. Warband, and because you got to bring Galadriel, Lady of Light. You got to bring her. Then Warband 2 is the Iron Hills Chariot Champions Edition, with Balin, Dwalin, Feely, and Keely. I did not bring the bows. I preferred to get the extra guys. And then Warband number 3 is Alfred the Counselor, and with him is 3 Langtown Guard, with bows, 4 with just sword, 3 with spear. Then we've got the Master, who's got 2 Lake Town Guard with spear, 4 with sword, 3 with bow, and then Braga, who's got 3 with bow, 1 with spear, and 3 with sword. To anticipate some questions, I don't really know why I ended up dividing the army or the warriors between the warbands like that, but that's how they came out. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter all that much. They're basically, they're basically kind of the extra bodies that kind of protect the flanks of the chariot as it is charging forward, being driven by Braga free fueled marches and moves. The chariot is what you're depending on to do the hitting, but if you have to, you've got a whole bunch of fight 3 guys that can be promoted to fight 4 to kind of hold the flanks of the chariot. And there's some interesting tactics you could use with this. Obviously, terrain is an issue, and how the army deploys. I actually earlier today, right before this podcast, I played a test game with this against Nate, someone from our local group, and we ended up playing Hold Ground, and I had an absolutely horrific deployment that I managed to pull out of, but it was kind of interesting to see how that came off. But basically the cloud of Lake Town guys kind of accompanies this chariot. The heroes basically kind of stick behind it, and the cloud of guys is there to prevent the chariot from being basically bypassed. So you have to engage the cloud of guys, and ideally, if you set this up, there'll be, I think Devin, your phrase for this was bubble wrapping, like you would bubble wrap a Mumak. There's going to be a bubble wrapping of Lake Town Guard in front of this chariot, probably like 3 or 4 just random guys with swords, and their job is basically to be charged, so that the chariot cannot be charged, and then the chariot will just go ahead and run them over, and then run over whatever charged them and go crashing on into the big heroes behind. And the chariot's going to kind of hide behind that initial little skirmish line, and it will charge toward whatever the biggest hero is that's out there and overwhelm that guy, and then go on from there. So that's basically what the plan is.
Can you go back to the list?
Yeah.
The list again.
So
So-
Bob or Devin, if you want to go first.
No, I mean, obviously. So I've played the chariot actually in Articon, ironically enough, and did pretty decently enough with it, I'd say, as well as you can do with an Iron Hills Chariot. These ones, though, are I mean, I've like to have this crew of guys is like so difficult to stop. I've played against it before, and it's kind of ridiculous. Now you have them backed up by a whole slew of stuff. Honestly, yeah, you ignore them and kill the army is basically what I think you're trying to do here. They're just really, really annoying to take down. Trying to think how. So you have 36 guys at a point level this size. I think you're going to be dealing with armies that will be well enough equipped to handle losses that the chariots would do, and then still be able to tank hit to wipe out a lot of the army. So I think that's kind of the. Now, obviously, I'm throwing scenarios aside. I mean, you mentioned a bunch of interesting scenarios, but like, as far as the army itself, that's my first initial thought is just to go after the rest of them. And it won't take a lot for a 900-point army. I mean, this is assuming other people don't play big things, but a 900-point army shouldn't have too much difficulty reducing 36 models in half. And then once that happens, your army starts running.
Yeah, but the chariot never runs.
Well, the chariot's not going to go anywhere. Yeah,
chariot's not going to go anywhere. So my solution to that problem is you basically put, except for the guys who are kind of bubble wrapping the chariot, so that the chariot kind of gets that initial run, is once the chariot is kind of committed and starts crashing into things, the whole mob of Lake Town Guard is then going to proceed to basically run from like whichever side of the chariot it's on around to the other side of the chariot. And especially if I can have the chariot kind of like running up next to terrain, basically the mob of Lake Town guys is basically running around behind the chariot as the chariot does its thing. So the chariot's going to be kind of wheeling around, scooping up guys who are trying to chase the army of Lake Town guys.
Chariot's movement is fairly static once you get around it. I mean, there's no concern. I mean, you obviously kill some things, but like getting around the chariot to grab these guys isn't going to be too difficult, especially once you factor in terrain. I mean, I imagine that like once you do, then it's like going to take a while for you to circle back.
No, I mean, it pivots 45, it goes 4, it pivots 45, it goes 4, and you can basically kind of keep what you try and do is you keep the mob of Lake Town guys so that if the enemy is going after them, they're always going to end up kind of within the charge arc of the chariot.
I mean,
and
that's heavily dependent on like staying together then. Like,
yeah. This list stays together. I mean, it can spread out if it needs to spread out and have a couple guys grab objectives and stuff like that. But
I think you would also be a little vulnerable to some elements of suiciding after enough of your troops have died. I mean, most armies should be big enough to be able to handle losses and still be able to spread out more than you can just because you're small numbers. Which, of course, once they lose the protection of Galadriel Lady of Light, then shooting these guys isn't exactly complicated either. Okay. That's the main weakness, I would say. You have a low model count combined with defense 4 and a troop type that requires being around the master. Are you still a historical alliance? No, Lady.
No.
So yeah, even with
it's a 6-inch master bubble.
Well, with that many models, it should be perfectly fine to get everybody within.
It's that many models at first. I mean, yes, to keep them within that shouldn't be hard if he stays actually like as a little tight unit. But any scenario or situation that forces, like, because one thing about suiciding is like basically if Matt is staying all together and your army's big enough to tank the hits, the scenarios can start to end depending on what the situation is. And Matt may not have enough guys by the time that happens to actually still keep up with it. Like a broken army might still be evened out with his army in size. And that would be the one concern if the Iron Hills Chariot has not killed significant enough models by that point. And I say specifically then because realistically, it looks like the master's job is not to, go against the opposing army, but keep your guys alive, like if they get engaged. That's my initial thought. So
Yeah, no, I mean that's the idea is I've got enough guys, and with the master behind them, they're good enough, and with Lady of Light, keeping them from being shot, so that he actually needs to commit his army to kill mine, and he can't disperse. And if he commits his army to kill mine, then I pull all my second rank guys back, and the chariot runs over all of it. That's basically the plan. We'll see if it works.
All right, Rob, your thoughts?
So, I mean, I saw Iron Hill's Chariot with the Champions of Erebor, and I just stopped reading because that's awesome and nothing else matters. Like, anytime you can unironically bring such an epic model to an event is just great. And yet, everything that everybody has said, including you, Matt. Yes, I mean, you've got the numbers you can have with the Lake Town. They're probably the right choice. I'm assuming Lady of Light is there to just fortify the chariot and also provide the blinding light till you get in there.
You need you need the protection from you need the protection from magic, and you need the protection from shooting.
Yeah, makes total sense. But at the end of the day, like, you're gonna run in there and do donuts through people, and it's gonna be awesome. And they're either gonna have the army list and or skill level to know how to deal with the chariot, or they won't, and that will be pretty determinative on how your games go. But you're going to have such an awesome time because it's the Champions of Erebor in a chariot. When do you ever see that in an event, right? So I'm all the way thumbs up. I don't know if you're going to win, but I think that
they're going to have fun doing it.
Yeah, you're going to have a great time. And I think that there are enough people who won't know how to deal with the chariot just because it's like, this thing has how many might? It has how many heroics? It has what? It can kill your guys? Like,
Matt,
I think it's going to be awesome.
As a full disclaimer, I was reviewing it at the competitive because, I mean, obviously, yeah, it's a fun tournament to bring a fun list, but then it's like, why review? I mean, I'll just bring an army of ruffians, whatever. Like, I don't know.
Totally. Idea that life in Lake Town is cheap enough as it is, like without a chariot, mowing them down on your own side. It just, I wish I could give you a more competitive review, but I just can't get past the chariot. It's too awesome to me.
So Devin, just for historical record here, based on your criticism, how many times have you beaten this chariot?
Well, I've only played it once.
No, you played it twice.
It was the second time. I'm trying to think. I had the half trolls, and then
the half trolls, and then you played it again at the tournament in Virginia when you had the the bat swarm list.
I don't remember, but I'll take your word. I tend not to remember traumatic memories. No.
They get stuck real deep back there.
Yeah, that's right.
Name the list Fast and the Furious, because it is all about family in this case. So
it is all about family until your family runs you down to get at the enemy on the other side.
To reference the one match I do remember, I actually think the list was stronger in the sense because you only have 4 models, and those models were highly mobile and could get out of the way. Here you've added a weakness. Now, keep in mind, once again, I'm just analyzing it because that starts the conversation. I think everyone in the world will give you points for awesome, but it's like, I don't know, why am I reviewing it?
Just to give you the reasoning on kind of why this, because I mean, it could have gone that way. I could have just thrown in Dwalin on the goat and Gandalf or something like that.
Yeah.
The problem with that list is when you run into somebody who really knows how to play against it, there aren't enough figures to prevent you from just going around the chariot. Mm-hmm. And then the chariot could end up just kind of spinning wheelies all around the board while everybody else runs around, grabs objectives, shoots down Gandalf, whatever. This has a big enough chunk of guys, and they are sufficiently tough enough to kill with a master behind them, that you actually have to engage it with your army.
Yeah.
And once you've engaged it with your army is a static target for the chariot if I can get the chariot in. And I'm perfectly happy to run over some Lake Town guards to get at the army that's on the other side of those Lake Town guards.
I just think with that considered, you definitely are willing to run over your own guys, chewing through defense 4, and I only got to kill 15 of these guys, or 16, I guess, to break you.
No, you need to kill 19
or 18.
17, it says on this.
You only need to kill 12 because he's going to run over at least 6.
Yeah. So
yeah, 17.
Once again, what you're trying to do is pretty awesome. You're trying to make a competitive Champions of Erebor chariot list. So for that, I always give props because I love doing stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And if you were to make it competitive, this, I think, is probably one of the best ways to do it. So I'll give you definite points for that because I can't think of another way at 900, I'll call it 895, whatever, the points. to make this more competitive than what you've done here. Adding the numbers to make it where you have to stop an army, giving the protection you need, because for anyone who doesn't know, you get enough compels on this chariot, and you might as well just say it's useless. So, I think you did the best you could do. I wouldn't know how to improve it. Let's put it that way.
Let me ask a rules question while I have this up, because a couple of different. So in the practice games with this has posed some rules questions, and something you just pointed out about breaking posed rules question. So Dwalin's fearless. Dwalin's on the chariot. The chariot never runs away. And this chariot is a hero. So I'm assuming that no warrior within 6 inches of this chariot is ever going to run away. Am I right about that?
Dwalin, I don't think is considered in combat.
Well, he doesn't. Yeah,
he just contributes dice to the fight, but he's never in combat. So therefore, he would stand fast, which they'd have to do individually anyway because they're not in combat. So yeah, I would think you're correct that while the chariot's in play, no warrior is ever going to run.
Right.
That to me would make sense. It's the breaking. I'm less concerned about too many of your warriors running after breaking. I think by that point you've already lost half your army and you're still defense forward. I think it's the scenarios ending. I think it's them gaming the scenarios. That would be more of my concern, but it would depend on the scenario. If it's to the death, then I'd probably shake your hand at a certain point with this thing. But not to the death. What is it? Lords of Battle. Sorry, Lords of Battle.
Devin, I wasn't. I think your competitive criticism was entirely fair, right? I'm not making any comments on that. And I think, Matt, you gave a lot of thought to the list to shore up the various weaknesses. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a skew list, because anytime you put something like that model in there, it turns into a skew list. And the more skew your list is, the more your matchups become either really good or really bad, right? It creates the wave function. So in matchups that are favorable, you're a great player, you're going to do well. In matches that are not favorable, you're going to have an uphill climb. But yeah, I think you put good thought into it. I think I would agree with Devin's criticisms, but at the end of the day, Iron Hill's Chariot with the champions of Erebor. So
I think what's going to happen is you're going to get to Nashville, because it's a fun tournament. The terrain's going to be crazy, and it'll be
that could easily happen. So that happened when I showed up at Articon with this thing. I think we were playing Seize the Prize, and the prize ended up in the middle of the table. And, Articon is famous for having little terrain. So I thought it was okay. But this happened to be the board that had a patch of rough ground, right in the middle of the table. So my chariot is just sitting there staring at the prize in the middle of the table and not able to get at it. But
I've seen the movie. Doesn't it ignore terrain? Doesn't it just jump over everything?
Yeah,
think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a sled. You just go over things. Right?
It's got Mountain Dweller. Just jump stuff.
Any last thoughts, Mick?
I have one more rules question. This actually came up today. This doesn't involve a chariot, but is there anything that prevents Alfred from spending his will point for dubious counsel on himself?
I don't know the wording. It would say if it says other.
I've got the book here. I can look.
The any friendly hero within any friendly Lake Town hero within 6 inches.
If it doesn't have the word other, then there's nothing that prevents it, which means technically it just becomes a free point of might regardless. You just sort of add.
Nominate a single friendly Lake Town hero model within 6 inches. That's all it says. So, and it doesn't have any caveat for having to be any other hero. So yes, you can.
So basically, he's a might battery if you want him to be.
Yeah. So just to let you know what brought this question on. So we're playing Hold Ground, so it's Maelstrom of Battle. The first warband I bring in is Alfred because he has no might. Alfred rolls a 2, gets put in some obscure corner of the board. And then I proceed to roll a 2 with Galadriel, Lady of Light, mighted down to a 1, a 2 with the Chariot, mighted down to a 1, a 2 with the Master of Laketown, mighted down to a 1, and a 1 with Braga. So there was Alfred all by his lonesome, and basically the rest of the army showed up and ate his lunch. So I was like, I wonder what I can use these will points on. I guess I got to spend them on myself and try and call heroic moves to get out of here.
Now, I would check the FAQ just in case it's somewhere in those 800 pages, because there's that weird interaction where he takes a might to give a might. So how does he do that to himself? But I mean, nothing from the book prevents that I can see.
Yeah.
I think with the order of operations, he would do exactly that. He would
Yeah.
take the might. If it's 0, then it's 0. Then
Alfred always profits. That's the lesson.
Yeah, that's how we played it. Is if he spends it on himself, he gets a might regardless of what he rolls.
Yeah.
I'm awesome.
And then the last question, and I can't remember what the answer to this is, and that's with when you bring a big model on the table in reconnoiter or not reconnoiter, in hold ground, in Maelstrom of Battle. It used to be that you had to place it on the table so that it could actually fit, and then you measured from where you placed it. And I know that I recall that the FAQ still requires you to be able to place it entirely on the table, so you can try and screen off a big model by kind of spreading out your guys kind of along the edge. But the question is, do you place it on and then measure it, or do you measure it somehow from the edge of the table when you place it on? I'm not quite sure how to do it.
Maybe a misunderstood. So you're saying when you put the token in the center of the map that represents the center, you're asking, do you measure?
No. You've just rolled to have it come in Maelstrom.
Oh, just rolling it. Oh, okay. Sorry.
So you had it come on. So you got this Mumak or this Chariot or whatever the big thing is, and you find a place to place it on the board where it can fit on the board.
No, that's not how that works. No, you move onto the board.
Okay, but does that mean you can move onto the board like through figures that have been deployed along the edge?
No, the FAQ. So the FAQ made it where you can't trample until you're fully on the board now.
So functionally,
okay.
you have to be able to fit on.
Yeah, you can't like just start killing things.
Got it. All right.
All right. I'll bring it over to Mick if you have any other thoughts on this. I know there's been a lot of talk, so.
Yeah, I think all the points have been covered, and I actually dropped out for a moment because of my internet connection. But the moment I reconnected, you guys were talking about the list, and I was just seeing on my screen just the very bottom of the second page. I was seeing like 34 models and thinking, what is this? Is that some sort of like signal tower or something like that?
Yeah. 34 miles.
And then I see, it's champions. So I actually wondered, how would you play against a signal tower here, Matt?
How would I play against the signal tower?
Yeah.
With this list?
With this list?
Yeah.
By the way, what a game that would be if that happened.
Yeah.
So I guess a lot of people probably don't know what Mick is talking about. If for those who don't know, Matt has a pretty famous list over here where it's a signal tower, 19 berserkers in Azog.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want more details on that, I'm sure there's a video, I think Unusual Armies or something that we put out, but that's what he's talking about. And that list is actually surprisingly more effective than most people imagine. So,
yep.
But all right, go ahead.
So I think, what I'm debating here is whether I think what you try and do is you try and pin Azog with, the Chariot, or I'm sorry, pin Azog with a guy, or basically you use the skirmish line, let Azog charge into something, and then you run the Chariot into him, and you have a decent shot of just of killing the white warg out from under him if you can ram it in. If not, you're going to do some damage probably to him, and I don't think he's necessarily you want to keep ramming him with this Chariot. I mean, if you can kill a whole bunch of berserkers, you can kill a whole bunch of berserkers with the Chariot. But probably the berserkers are going to disperse. But you slam that Chariot into him, and you just use it like a bumper car. And eventually, I think the impact hits from the Chariot will kill him, even if he's winning. I'm not sure you even call heroics because he's going to get the free counter. Although you got plenty of. You have plenty of stuff to, I guess you call the heroic and he does the counter call. And if he flubs it, because if he flubs it, you get a decent roll. You're definitely going to win it. But even if you don't lose it, I mean, he can't afford to ever lose a combat against this thing. But yeah, it's just basically you just take this Chariot and you make a beeline for Azog. And that's what you do.
Nice. Well, good luck.
All right. Well, we'll see how it goes.
All right. Looks like Matt drank from the Fountain of Youth and has rejoined us. Evan is here now, and he's going to go over his list that he is taking to the same tournament that Matt was just going over. So, Evan, if you want to go over your list real quick.
All right, sure. So I've got Mordor and Dark Denizens of Mirkwood list. So in the first warband, and obviously he's my leader, is the Witch King of Angmar. He's got obviously 3 extra mites, 14 will, 3 fate, the Morgul blade, the crown of Morgul, and a fell beast. So he's pretty kitted up there. And he's got 6 black nums, 4 Morannons with shields and spears, 1 warg rider with throwing spear and shield, and a Morannon with shield, spear, and banner. And the second warband is the Shadow Lord on horse. He's got a warg rider with throwing spear and shield, a tracker, 5 black nums, 5 Morannon orcs with shields and spears. Warband number 3 is a basic ring wraith with 2 extra might and 1 extra fate. He's got a tracker and 5 black nums, 5 Morannon orcs with shields and spears. And then in warband number 4 is the Spider Queen and a Bat Swarm. So all in all, it's 40 models and a good selection of heroes there, with the Witch King on Fell Beast and the Spider Queen and a Bat Swarm sort of there as an assassination force to go and kill off basically all the heroes in the world. And just 3 casters there with the Witch King, the Shadow Lord, and the Ring Wraith to get rid of the will stores of the opponent's heroes in order to better get the assassinations off. So the way I envision this army playing, and I've played it before that way, is it's very opportunistic. You don't really want to like fully engage with the opponent immediately. You want to spend time weakening their heroes, and if you can, jumping in with the Bat Swarm and the Witch King or the Spider Queen and calling a heroic combat, killing off their hero and running away, and just sort of doing weakening moves like that. The Shadow Lord helps with that because he effectively minimizes the power of opponents shooting, so you can spend more time sitting back and patiently waiting. I guess the army sort of plays almost an inverse to your standard sort of army, because your standard army goes in with their big heroes and they just crush the opponent's troops and then they sort of work on the heroes. This army focuses on killing the heroes first and then goes for the troops when they're done with that. So what do you guys think?
Okay. I'll bring it over to Mick first.
Also, this looks really solid. I like the 3 ring wraiths. Obviously, at 900 points, you might run into Galadriel and the likes. So having the 3 wraiths is actually it's similar to what we talked about at some point in one of the previous episodes, that you're trying to overpower any sort of resistance. You either go all in or you don't bother. So yeah, I really like that. I really like the inclusion of just the 3rd wraith, of just like, okay, I'm gonna have 2 might points. I'm not gonna do anything else. I'm just gonna be casting spells. So that's really cool. I think yeah, in general, it just looks really solid. The numbers might not be that huge, but then are you guys playing on a 4x4 or a 6x4?
It's a 4x4. Otherwise,
Yeah,
my army would be much larger.
Yeah, so on a 4x4, I don't mind it. Like even at like 1,000 points, like you can easily be okay with like 45-50 models, because especially if you run into more terrain, the larger armies just won't be able to do anything with their numbers. And as Evan just mentioned, like if it was a 6x4, then you would have to have like 20 more models or something like that. So yeah, well, it's got everything. Like it's got really solid heroes. It's got a lot of magic. It has Spider Queen to just take out random stuff. Black Numenorians at the front. Yeah, I can't really see anything wrong with it. Like it just looks solid.
Okay, Devin.
Just so I to re-hit these numbers, you have how many models again, Evan?
40.
Okay. So I'm just looking at some of these like little variables. I mean, yeah, at 900 points, you're probably going to get everything in there, which you have, numbers of defense 6. It's fine at 40, I think, at 900 points. I think that's all right, especially considering what you have here, the 2 monsters and plenty of magic. I'm trying to... I'm kind of wondering if like your serious lack of heroic strike and is a problem. I'm like looking at it here, like okay, so you're assassinating horses pretty easily, obviously. You definitely have already mentioned that you're going to assassinate the heroes, and I totally get that. I think at 900 points, you are going to be dealing with multiple heroes that maybe might be fortified with Galadriel, but even if not, you're gonna have a whole lot of models that you're gonna need to target. You said like Shadow Lord's 14 will, and I guess most of him is going to be pretty much devoted to just bringing someone down. So it might the fact that you put 3 wraiths is the reason I'm like, okay, it's probably fine. Trying to look, where's the stat for the other wraith? The third wraith, what is it? 170?
So it's 2 might, 7 will, 1 fate.
Okay. The addition of the third wraith probably will help, but I do think someone with certain types of heroes or whatever will definitely really exhaust your magical firepower, especially if the Witch King starts getting engaged. Your might count is also slightly low, and I know that's kind of surprising to say, but it's just I'm basing it on what you're trying to do, because I'm imagining the Spider Queen and the Witch King are really devoting their own might to what they need to do in combat. So you're really reserving 2 and 2 from Shadow Lord and Ringwraith to do everything you need to do, and hoping that the Ringwraith doesn't just get assassinated somehow. I don't Legolas, who knows, but or some kind of magic, because you're definitely going to see magic at this. I think that's the critical thing, is like once your magic stops working, if it stops working, you do have 2 beat sticks, but I just imagine your options are going to start getting limited real quick. And I'm trying to pick for weaknesses in the list, by the way, guys. So like, yeah, I mean, obviously this is a very strong list and has everything it needs to do, what it needs to do. I just wonder how you'd slow down. I'm trying to think of like some various combinations, but like, I don't know. I got Last Alliance in my head, Elendil, Gil-galad, which is a little unfair, but because Elendil is a little anti this list. How many people even have that list? So let's think. I mean, I guess most lists are probably going to have about as many here. Like you have Spider Queen, Witch King, Shadow. Yeah, I mean that's the only thing. Is like it's just you're. I think the might you can't challenge heroic moves as often as you probably want to, and if you do, it starts weakening your list a little bit. And if you start running out of, like if you face a list that's like for some reason got Galadriel and she starts fortifying everything, I think you're going to exhaust yourself trying to pummel people with magic, trying to get through the Fortify Spirit. And I know that's one model. Is there any other model in the game that casts Fortify Spirit? Oh, Gandalf. But
Gandalf,
yeah. How often is he brought?
Not very.
So okay, Evan, let's pose that question. I know you, when you're on the podcast, always talk about how much you like Legolas and you throw him into multiple lists. And we also always talk about Lady of Light. So how would you, with this list, deal at 900 points if either or if both of those models came up against you?
So immediately, it really depends on what the scenario is, because if it's some sort of maneuverability scenario or something like that, I'll just go for it. I'll go for the movement, maybe go try and cast some spells on warriors instead, or go for a hero, because if she's got multiple heroes, she can only fortify one at a time. So go after the one that she can't before it becomes too late. If I start in range of casting, I'm just going to call a heroic move on the first turn and just start casting spells at her to try and stop her from doing Fortify Spirits and that sort of thing. Other than that, my bat sits within charge range of her. Maybe I compel some guys so they're not blocking her, and then I just roll some courage tests, and then eventually the bad is going to pass. And then when it does, I just go all in and try to get her. But it's tricky. It's tricky to do. It's going to require a lot more hurls through spear supports and stuff like that, knocking the heroes on horses off their horses through those hurls, and just relying on my troops to not die and playing the objectives. So it's not an easy matchup.
I can still see you being real sneaky on that round one play. It's like you have nothing threatening the opponent, and, they don't see it, and then you call a heroic move, and they're like, all right, sure, whatever, you can charge me first. And then you just totally obliterate.
Actually, a funny story about that. It was last edition. I think I had like 3 ring wraiths or something like that. They were all on fell beasts, and it was to the death. So they were like 24 inches away from each other. And turn 1, I called a move and a march, I think it was, marched all of my fell beasts forward, and sap-willed Galadriel, Lady of Light, across the board and drained her of all her will, and she couldn't cast Fortify Spirit anymore. So it's definitely something I've pulled on people before, and a lot of them don't expect it.
Yeah, you wouldn't. As long as you don't look threatening. Like, if you're fighting like I guess Galadriel wouldn't be in like an all cav list. So, yeah, most of the time they'd probably be like, all right, whatever, I'm already pretty defensive here. So if you just don't seem threatening, they'll probably let you do it. So, or even worse, you'll get priority and they won't even counter it themselves. They'll just be like, yeah, all right, it's your turn first. So,
okay. Rob, any other thoughts?
No, I mean, that pretty much covers it, right? Like there is no obvious glaring weakness in the list. It's a very well put together list. At 895 points, if you're playing against good armies, the likelihood you're going to run into Lady of Light is like 90%, right? She's going to just be thrown into so many lists. But I mean, we've just talked to death about how that is an admitted, tough matchup, but there's workarounds, and some of it comes down to scenarios, some of it comes down to player skill. Your terror wall with the Harbinger will be really nice until you run into a lot of bodyguard troops, right? And so if you run into a bodyguarded army backed up by Lady of Light or Gandalf, it's going to become a lot more grindy. But I think you have the tools to pull out any game, including against Lady of Light. So yeah, it's a good list. It's gonna do well, I think.
Yeah, that's sort of what I like about this list, is it really has the tools to win any game.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem is sometimes if your dice are bad, if the Spider Queen charges in on a hero she's trying to kill and she botches her 3 dice, then you can have some big problems. So it can be somewhat swingy sometimes, but what I like about it is because you've got all these nasty threats that can go and kill even the strongest of heroes, even if you're losing the game, you can pull something and completely flip it on its head.
Yeah, I also like that you have the triple drain courage, which some heroes you just eliminate by making it impossible for them to do anything, right? So yeah, it's solid. I mean, yeah, sometimes in Lord of the Rings, you botch a dice roll or something goes horribly wrong, and that's just a dice game. It happens. So
okay. Thank you for tuning into this episode. As always, leave any lists you'd like for us to review in future episodes, as well as any ideas you'd like for us to speak about as well. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week.